Hi, welcome to video number 2 of how to use the Caltrans Hot Mix Asphalt Smoothness Adjustment Spreadsheet. In this video 2, we'll provide a general overview of how the spreadsheet works and how to download it. So this is the second of 10 videos. So the first step to using the spreadsheet is to download the latest version from the Caltrans website. So here I'm showing you the Caltrans website, dot.ca.gov. At the top of the screen you'll see a couple choices: travel, work with Caltrans. There's a selection called programs. Click on programs. That'll reveal the programs within Caltrans, and we're in the construction program, so we're going to click on construction. And this pavement smoothness is covered under the construction standards section, so we're going to click on pavement smoothness under construction standards. So this page is under construction right now. Currently all we have is the HMA adjustment spreadsheet on there, and then a link to some ProVal smoothness module training. If you click on this HMA smoothness pay adjustment spreadsheet, it will give you the choice to download the spreadsheet. I'll go ahead and click on this. I've already saved it, but I would save this to my folder and then open it. Okay, we'll go ahead and close this browser. We're going to assume that I've already closed it and opened it. So this file is currently called IP Adjust HMA version 1.04. And in the top right corner is the version that we're on right now. So we started out with version 1.0, and as we needed to make changes for any bugs or improvements to the spreadsheet, we increased the versioning from 1.0 to 1.01, and you can go ahead and see what the issues were if you were curious. So when you open up this spreadsheet, the first thing you need to do is enable the content. This spreadsheet is somewhat complicated, and it looks very complicated, but it does a lot, and it's not really that complicated. In this overview, I'm going to try to make it less complicated for you. So the first thing you have to do is recognize that this spreadsheet has macros, and it's not going to work unless you enable the macros. So when you first open up this spreadsheet, you're going to get a security warning. Some active content has been disabled. Click for more details. So you need to enable the content or the spreadsheet will not work. So I'm going to click this button. And often, if somebody sends you this spreadsheet in an email, there might be another warning at the top, and if you try to run the spreadsheet within an email program, the spreadsheet doesn't work. So you need to save this to your folder or your computer somewhere and then open it. Then enable the macros. There's quite a few macros in here. So in general, there's yellow cells throughout, and these yellow cells have a double border around them. So if you have a problem seeing the yellow color on your screen, look for the cells that have the double black border around them. These are the cells that are going to require input. So we can see them all across the top here. Also, in each one of these, not each one of these cells, but a lot of these cells, there's a small red triangle in the upper right corner. If you hover your cursor over any of these cells that have that yellow triangle, there will be a message box that pops up with information on that cell that you may want to know. Most of it's very obvious, but there's still a comment in there. There's buttons along the left side, and these buttons run macros. There are also macros that have a lot of calculations that effectively calculate what is in our specifications. If you look in the tables, there's macros that run those calculations. They're essentially custom functions. So the first button here will save the file, and when we click this Save File button, what this will do is basically save the file under a predefined name, but we can't get the predefined name until we complete all these yellow cells, because when you look in our specs, we need to name the file according to the project number, the district, the county route, the date it was developed, the lane numbers. A lot of information that's got to go into that, and we're going to enter all that information in these yellow cells, or the cells with the double black borders around them, and that information is going to get strung together in a string up here in this cell I3, and it's going to have that name for you. So we will be able to go ahead and just click this file, and it's going to save the file to the same folder that you opened up the blank spreadsheet from. But you don't want to do this until you have all this information in there. And so once we enter all the information in here, we'll still have to import the first existing inertial profile, and we'll cover that shortly, and that will populate the begin station and the end station. We just can't populate that automatically. We want these stations to match the first distance measuring instrument station on the first segment. Down below are the segments, and the last station. So these two cells basically look for the first and the last station. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just cover in general. So this is the upper general section where we're entering all the input. Once we have the spreadsheet completed, you can go ahead and click this print button. It's going to find the last row of data that's of segment data that's down below, and it's going to essentially print everything you need for a backup for a payment adjustment. The next button is got the text on it, says export CSV data file for future analysis. So this spreadsheet has got a lot of hidden columns with a lot of information that's overwhelming to a user. There's still a lot on this spreadsheet. If I didn't hide everything, it would be more confusing. But a lot of this information might be valuable to contractors, and we're going to use it for analyzing, how well everybody's doing, and possibly if we need to adjust specifications in the future, we'll collect all this data, and we're going to export the data out using the CSV function. If you click this button here, the MRI Targets, for hot mix asphalt pavements, the specs adjust themselves if we're paving over a surface that's over 135 inches per mile for a single lift. And then if it's less than 3/10, if it's 3/10 or more, there's another value that it'll adjust for. But sometimes it's nice to know what the MRI targets are. You don't need to know it because the spreadsheet's going to calculate it for you. But if you want to know it, you just click this button, and it runs the macro that unhides column A. And there's your MRI targets. You can click it again if you don't want that to show up. That was something that was added at the last minute at the request of industry. So that's the macro buttons. So they're, again, we don't want to save the file until we have the full file name up here, because that'll error out. Okay, now once we enter all this data and we're going to import mean roughness index data into the spreadsheet, it'll populate all the segment information we need here. So this spreadsheet is essentially it's a workbook that contains several spreadsheets or worksheets. So the first worksheet that we're looking at is titled Pay Adjust. That's got everything we've been looking at here. The next four spreadsheets down here are the spreadsheets that the contractor is going to use to import their mean roughness index data to. So the contractor will import their existing inertial profile data into the second spreadsheet. The third spreadsheet will be for the baseline profile data, the pave, and the final. We'll go back to the payment adjustment. Okay, so all this data is going to get brought forward onto the cover sheet automatically. Now the next four tabs, the orange ones, verify existing, verify baseline, verify pave, verify final. These are the worksheets that are set aside for the engineer. So when the contractor takes the ProVal project file and exports that data into the spreadsheet, by specification, he's got to submit that spreadsheet and then that same ProVal project file that he used to develop this spreadsheet, and provide it to the resident engineer. Now, we have to take steps to make sure that the data that gets imported directly from ProVal does not get manipulated on the spreadsheet. So there's nothing to prevent somebody from just going into the spreadsheet and changing a number on the back pages where the data is imported. So what we're doing to make sure nobody verifies that is that the resident engineer is going to import the contractor's same profile data from that ProVal project file he submits with the spreadsheet into these orange tabs, and it's going to do a comparison. And if there's any changes in mean roughness index data value, if anybody changed any of the numbers on the contractor's worksheets, it'll show up red on the orange worksheets, and the resident engineer will return the payment adjustment request back to the contractor, and we're asking resident engineers to send an email to headquarters construction so we can track how often this is happening, and if it's specific happening in a specific area, so we'll be keeping track of that. So that's the plans on how we're going to handle that. So this is a general overview. So now, once all the information's entered here, this cell here is going to tell you what the total dollar adjustment is, and we'll cover that in more detail in some of these following videos. Okay, so down below there's some more yellow input. So when we enter the total opportunities for improvement up here in the top, that's one of the choices. I'm just going to put a 1 in here. If I put a 1 in here, if there's data on any of these rows down here, it's going to automatically put a 1 in for the total opportunities. So we can change the number of opportunities segment by segment if necessary. Right now it's not putting any value down here because there's no data here, but if there were data here, it would enter a value. So if you needed to reset all of the opportunities for improvement to that value, you can just click this button and it'll reset everything to yes. To 1 or whatever the value was. So I'm going to go ahead and just change this back to blank. So the next yellow input cell is for the select. You're going to select this column O if you want to use the final profile for your payment adjustment. This program is going to default to use the PAVE profile for the final adjustment, and you have the option to go ahead and use the final profile for adjustment. Except that if you use the final profile for adjustment and the final MRI value is smoother and you already had incentive, it's not going to increase your incentive, but it may decrease your disincentive, if that makes sense. On the left there's the 2 columns for full width and partial width segment corrections. If your project has a table in there that calls for full or partial width segment corrections, you'll need to let the spreadsheet know that that segment or those series of segments have partial or full width segment corrections, and you're going to have to place a check mark in one of these boxes, and then the spreadsheet's going to calculate everything automatically. The next place that we have to tell the spreadsheet is there's no way to get the information automatically out of ProVal regarding the localized roughness. So this spreadsheet essentially makes payment adjustments based on mean roughness index, but we still have the specification requirement for localized roughness, and when we import the MRI data, it doesn't have the localized roughness information with it, and so we have to manually go into each one of these and certify that there are no localized roughness values above the threshold. So to do that, we're going to have to enter a 0 here. So you'd enter a 0 and you can drag it down, drag that, enter 0, grab the bottom right corner of that cell, you can drag them down, to the bottom if you are certifying that all the segments are 0. So if you have a lane that has one localized roughness value in it, your lane is not compliant, so we're not going to make the payment adjustment until the whole lane's compliant. So you're not going to see you'll see dollar amount adjustments, but they're going to have strike through until you certify that that segment is free of ALR, localized roughness. And if there are anything other than zeros on these cells, it's not going to total out. It's not going to total up the payment adjustment up here. So that's the basically general overview of how this spreadsheet works. So we'll go ahead and end video number 2 and move on to video number 3.